I'm gonna level with you, friends. I had this really measured, calculated rollout plan for this channel. A proper introduction, a good healthy wave of videos to launch with, a few theory breakdowns about possible NHL to Utah scenarios. And then this week happened, and suddenly we're going full speed ahead because we really need to talk about what happened yesterday and everything that preceded it. I'm GMPM, hopefully a big contributor to Utah's hockey voice as time passes, but circumstances dictate that I'll have to introduce myself properly at a later time, because the NHL in Utah could go from theoretical to official as early as next week. In any case, welcome to the channel. So how on earth did we get here? Utah Jazz owner Ryan Smith has never made a secret of his ambitions of bringing an NHL team to the Salt Lake Valley. Ever since he dropped a tweet confirming that such a move was in motion, there's been an underlying excitement that such a move was possible around 2027, 2028 or so. I even tried to do my part by subtly pressing the issue to Smith last year when the Arizona Coyotes' Tempe arrangement got soundly defeated in the ballot box. I like to think that helped in some small way. Let me have this, okay? Smith's rhetoric became far more provocative earlier this year when he publicly requested the NHL to initiate the expansion process, and that his ownership group is prepared to host an NHL team at the Delta Center as early as this coming fall. This fall, as in 2024. This is a statement that the fighting game community would refer to as option select for all my gamers in here. In a single press release, Smith is simultaneously soliciting an expansion team while openly declaring a willingness and ability to whisk the Arizona Coyotes away from their perpetual building woes, and from the state of Arizona itself in the process. You could also theoretically extend that offer to the Winnipeg Jets, who seem to be having entirely self-inflicted attendance struggles that the league explicitly warned them about when they moved the Atlanta Thrashers north of the border. But that's another video entirely, the way things seem to be playing out in real time. This was not a unilateral statement either. The same day, the National Hockey League itself posted a release effectively telling the Smith Group that we see you, we respect you, and we look forward to doing future business with you. Shortly after that, league brass would travel to Utah in person to meet with both Smith and the state legislature. So there's suddenly way too much smoke to suggest there's not a fire brewing. I'll speak later on what I specifically believe they discussed. More recently, the Arizona Coyotes began taking particular interest in a land auction east of Phoenix, which is slated to take place toward the end of June, with the land going to the biggest and, critically, the best bid. That's going to come up in a moment. So committed are they to this path that one of the team's owners, Javier Gutierrez, flatly told the Phoenix media that they're putting all of their eggs into this one basket. There is no plan B, there is no contingency plan. If they lose this bid, that's it for the Coyotes. The team's plans for this land purchase leaked, clearly intentionally, revealing an absolutely gorgeous entertainment district next to Scottsdale with a massive shopping plaza, concert venue, over 1,000 apartments, presumably for dedicated Coyotes fans who want to live right next to the arena. It truly looks like hockey heaven. This push, however, looks to be over as quickly as it began. Scottsdale Mayor Dave Ortega, clearly with some kind of axe to grind, pushed back against the project, addressing public grievances that ranged from traffic to commercial competition concerns to utility infrastructure, essentially telling the Coyotes that he wouldn't lift a finger to help them set up shop, basically across the street. It seemed like a minor hurdle, maybe just work with nearby Phoenix on utility infrastructure even though it would be more expensive, talk to the Arizona Department of Transportation to address traffic concerns, and respond to the commercial complaint with the fickle finger salute, to be blunt. However, maybe that hurdle isn't so minor because it's what kicked off the craziest week I've ever seen in my 3 decades plus as a hockey fan. Smith followed by, seemingly out of nowhere, soliciting Twitter pitches for NHL branding, which I took part in with a pitch that I'll go over later. Then word got out that the NHL was preparing 2 drafts of their 2024-25 schedule, one for the Arizona Coyotes playing the season once again out of Mullet Arena, and another operating on the assumption that they'll be packing it up and playing out of the Delta Center next season. Almost immediately, reports came in that Smith, NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman, and Coyotes owner Alex Meruelo were actively discussing the sale and relocation of the team to Salt Lake City, to be announced as early as April 18th, following the team's apparently final, home game. This makes me believe that Ortega has enough pull that he would use his influence as mayor of Scottsdale to go to the Arizona government with the claim that while the Coyotes' bid is probably the biggest, it is not the best, and use that to put his finger on the scales and award the auction to another bidder. That is the only explanation I can think of how this materialized so quickly. I'm personally of two minds on this. Obviously, as a hockey fan based in Utah, I'm excited because the league's arrival in Utah feels like something long overdue, and obviously I'm hoping to build a channel around it. On the other hand, I always feel terrible for good fan bases, and the Coyotes absolutely have a good fan base that I respect the hell out of, that gets screwed by bad ownership or politicians. That's why I'm more open-minded than most about the NHL going back into previously failed markets like Winnipeg, Atlanta, Hartford, and Quebec City. I promise I'll keep that energy if Arizona's fortunes change and they end up in the running for a second chance in the future. What is the environment like for the NHL in Utah, though, culturally, politically? Let's just say the future is bright for the Coyotes if things proceed as they appear to be. First, let's look at the existing and historical hockey culture in Utah, which actually goes all the way back to 1969 and a minor team called the Salt Lake Golden Eagles, which predate the Utah Jazz's arrival in Salt Lake City and are best known as the Calgary Flames farm team from back in the 80s and 90s, a role they would also play for the New York Islanders during their final season in 93-94. NHL mainstays like Stu Grimson, Trevor Kidd, Ziggy Palffy, and Theo Fleury played their minor hockey at the Salt Palace before the franchise was relocated in 1994, shortly after the arena was repurposed as a convention center. During their time in Salt Lake City, the Golden Eagles would be 3-time Adams Cup champions in the Old Western Hockey League and Central Hockey League, and 2-time Turner Cup champions during their tenure in the International Hockey League. So there's a strong championship culture here. After the Golden Eagles moved to Detroit to become the Vipers, Utah would go a year without pro hockey before the Denver Grizzlies would pack up and move to West Valley City's E-Center, now the Maverick Center, to become the Utah Grizzlies, which would then play host to prospects from the New York Islanders, Dallas Stars, and, ironically, the then Phoenix Coyotes. During these years, players like Nico Kapanen, John Sim, Trevor Daley, and Steve Ott would pass through the Salt Lake Valley, and the team would repeat as Turner Cup champions in their 2 inaugural seasons in West Valley. However, it should be noted that this is not the same organization that occupies the Maverick Center today. There is no franchise continuity. The lost 2004-2005 NHL season sent financial ripples through the entire professional hockey landscape, and the Utah Grizzlies were more affected than most, unable to resume play for 2005-2006, and ultimately being sold off to become the Lake Erie Monsters, who are today the Cleveland Monsters. A new ownership group would step in to purchase the Grizzlies' branding and reform the team a level below, in the ECHL, where they continue operating to this day out of the Maverick Center. Unfortunately, however, the Grizzlies' glory days are a distant memory, as the ECHL version of the team has not made it to a Kelly Cup final in their nearly 2 decades of existence. The team still enjoys healthy local fan support, and as a part of the Colorado Avalanche organization, is always a threat to go on the rise at any point in time. We just haven't seen it yet. The college side of things is where Utah's hockey culture is most alive and well today, with healthy programs at the University of Utah, Weber State University, Brigham Young University, Utah Valley University, and my own alma mater, Utah State University. Rivalries abound, and you'll see firsthand what a hockey-mad state Utah really is. Is it varsity? No, but that's kind of the point I want to make. You get hot crowds for college hockey in Utah putting considerable weight behind the sport, even when the highest level of competition is worlds away. These aren't teams trying to get into the Frozen Four, but you'd never know that based on the energy in the stands. Then imagine how they'll turn out for the NHL. Honestly, it's a shame that the recent Utah visit from Gary Bettman and Bill Daly couldn't have coincided with a USU-BYU game that they could have taken the temperature of while they were visiting with Smith and the Utah State Legislature about the league's future in the Beehive State. If they could have experienced one of those games, maybe things would be moving even faster. I also want to take a moment to touch on the international aspect. Obviously, Salt Lake City hosted the 2002 Winter Olympics, which allowed for NHL participation and was an outstanding tournament for those who remember. Salt Lake City is also posting what is by all indications a front-running bid for either the 2030 or 2034 games, the anticipation for which will have a symbiotic relationship with the arrival and presence of an NHL franchise. If the league plays its cards right and allows for NHL participation in those years, The Olympics will feed the NHL team's popularity, and the NHL team's presence would build hype for the Winter Games, especially if a lot of its players are penciled into the international rosters. That isn't to say everything is smooth sailing for the NHL's prospects in Salt Lake City, however. Utah may be a hockey-mad state, but after decades of inheriting local coverage from teams like the San Jose Sharks, Colorado Avalanche, and Vegas Golden Knights, most Utah hockey fans have long-established loyalties that simply might not have room for the introduction of a local franchise, especially since a lot of those teams would be natural rivals with the Utah squad. While Utah is notorious for rewarding any league that decides to set up shop here with frothing support, the Utah Jazz and Real Salt Lake make clear examples of that, it might take a perfect storm of nationally and locally popular franchises experiencing a downturn, with a Utah management group putting a team together that can really steal hearts in order for them to become anything more than the locals' second favorite team. I myself will certainly get behind a Utah franchise, except when they're playing Colorado. That's just the best I can do. I even stuck by the Avs through the Tony Granato and Joe Sacco years. I'm obviously not going anywhere. That's something that ownership and management will have to spend a great deal of time solving, because NHL coverage has been extensive in Utah for years, even in the absence of their own franchise. The much bigger elephant in the room, though, is the NHL's recent partnership with the gambling apps like DraftKings, and I have to imagine that was a major topic of conversation with the Utah State Legislature during their aforementioned meeting with NHL brass. Politics in Utah lean extremely conservative, to the point that the state legislature is often looked at as the political wing of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, more widely known as the Mormon Church. Locally, we've even taken to calling it the Churcheslature. This has left Utah as a strictly gambling-prohibitive state for at least as long as I've been alive, and the apps are not exempt from that prohibition. It will be interesting to see whether the NHL can lobby their way around it, or if they're simply willing to operate in a market that is completely and utterly inhospitable to one of their biggest marketing sectors. I don't see anyone else talking about this, and I can't see it being anything less than a huge obstacle as this all starts to take shape. I hope one way or another they can work past it, because it would be tragic to see something as promising as a Utah NHL franchise get derailed by something this profoundly stupid. By which I mean both Utah politics and the NHL's knife-fanatical embrace of gambling advertising. Everyone kind of sucks on that front. Finally, there's one more bit of good news. However the state legislature feels about DraftKings, they are clearly all in on the expansion of Utah's sports culture, having allocated $900 million for a major league ballpark to play into the Larry H. Miller Group's ambitions of landing a relocating or expanded MLB franchise, and another $900 million for a new downtown home of the Utah Jazz and Ryan Smith's idealized NHL team, probably the Coyotes at this point. The Delta Center is a great building, but its configuration is decidedly less than ideal for hockey, as we've seen any time it hosts a preseason game. So this new building is an absolutely critical development to push this NHL bid forward, and affirms the local government's support of such a bid even if there are some causes for indigestion in the fine print. Now let's talk branding. Obviously, with Utah being a desert climate still, the Coyotes branding could carry over seamlessly, but Smith's open solicitation for team branding suggests that won't be the case. Don't worry, I have you covered. I've honestly put way more time, effort, thought, and energy into this topic than anyone who will likely never have a front office job with such a team probably ever should. I'm going to call in EA Sports NHL for the assist on presenting this. Obviously, none of this is actually reflective of what's likely to happen. I'd have to be a real high roller for that, and I'm probably the furthest thing from that. For the name, I would want to immediately tie this team to Utah's hockey past, but Salt Lake Golden Eagles should be off the table for reasons both obvious and underlying. We just had one Golden team join the league in the last decade at that, and in the Intermountain West no less. Like the Jazz, I also think it should be a team for the entire state of Utah, not just the Salt Lake Valley. So the branding would absolutely need to follow suit. Utah Eagles it is. The recently added Vegas Golden Knights and Seattle Kraken both have elements of their uniforms that really set them apart from both the traditional and more modern designs from around the league. So I would actually be more inclined to move hard in the opposite direction in Utah, making an effort to give the team a look more reminiscent of 70s and 80s teams, which also goes well with the really traditional, straightforward name. I would want to have some measure of brand solidarity with the Utah Jazz that we would be sharing a building with, but that's a situation that is kind of in flux right now. I like the minimalism of the Jazz uniforms these days, but it's a little too minimalist with two of their main designs forgetting that the team even has a logo. I do really like that black, yellow, and white scheme though, and it implements really well with the Eagles name, so let's adapt it here. Additionally, there's a push to reintroduce purple full-time into the Jazz's color scheme, and while I'm not ready to take that step with the Eagles, there's certainly room for a third jersey that adopts that palette. This is a point I was a little torn on because another third jersey concept could bring in the old Kelly greens of the Golden Eagles, but ultimately I'll let Minnesota keep their monopoly on the John Deeres and go in a different direction, at least for now. There are honestly a few things that could be experimented with in the future. Finally, the logo. I don't have a whole lot to say here. I picked one of the stock images from NHL 24, but I honestly wouldn't stray too far from this even with unlimited artistic resources. I'm a firm believer that if your logo is too elaborate for the school kids to draw on their notebooks, your logo sucks. Simple as that. It will also be the channel logo itself for the foreseeable because I really like it and reasons I'll get to in the future. Other than that, it's all about keeping it simple. 2 gold stripes on the side of the pants to symbolize the Golden Eagles' 2 Turner Cups, 3 on the socks to symbolize their 3 Adams Cups, and a look that really feels like the team has been in the NHL for decades. A genuine effort at a look that should feel as classic as what Original Six and expansion-era franchises are wearing today. I wanted to talk about the on-ice product as well, but this video has gone on long enough as it is, and there will be time for it later. For now, suffice it to say that the Coyotes have surprisingly little baggage on their payroll compared to the massive riches it has accumulated in these last few years. Most times, a new ownership group would prefer a fresh start with an expansion team, but I'm pretty sure the Smith Group will make an exception for the youth core and talent pipeline that is in place with the Coyotes organization. That's all for now. Future topics will involve how this roster should be managed to play to its strengths and still form a new identity in Utah, my take on the expansion talk sweeping the league and why it isn't the disaster a lot of hockey traditionalists are blowing it up to be, an introduction to a personal project that I hope further whets appetites for hockey in Utah, and hopefully, at some point, a proper introduction to exactly who I am as a hockey fan and commentator. If you like this video or are just excited about the prospect of NHL hockey finally landing in Utah, please be sure to let YouTube know all about it with your likes, comments, shares, and especially subscribes. Click the notification bell to know right away when a new video drops. I'm GMPM, and I hope to see you back here soon.